Good morning, friends, and welcome to another Facebook Live. Ooh, excuse me. I don't know where that came from. I'm Taylor, and this is Nick, and we are joining you today from our New England Seahorses exhibit. And our aquarist Tori has just thrown a little bit of breakfast into the tank, a little bit of shrimp for our seahorses, so keep your eyes out for them moving around the exhibit as we talk to you here this morning. Now, for those of you in New England, I hope you are all successfully digging out from the snowstorm that we had yesterday and staying safe and warm. And in order to help warm your hearts this morning, we thought we would share a cool Facebook Live theme with you. And this has everything to do with Seahorse Dads. So as you are aware, primarily the child rearing or offspring rearing duties typically fall to mom in the animal kingdom, but not so for seahorses. So today we thought we would share a little bit more about seahorse dads, how they do that, and also a little bit about moms as well, and hope that you have a newfound appreciation for the unique reproductive strategy of a seahorse. So I'll turn it over to Nick to start us off. Nick, would you like to introduce Aquatic Dads to our viewers this morning?
I would be honored to, Taylor.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everybody. So, although we are going to focus on Seahorse Dads, we would be remiss if we didn't mention that there are other dads in the animal world that do have similar child rearing skills, particularly in our collection here at the aquarium. If you were, or rather I should say that if you're a fan of our virtual video library, you've probably actually learned about a couple of these animals already, so you might recognize some of the names that I mentioned. So we're up here on the third floor of the building, but if you were to take a trip down to the first floor to our living corals exhibit in our tropical gallery, you would get a chance to view our Bangaii cardinalfish. Now, dads of this species are referred to as mouth brooders. And what that means is they protect their fertilized eggs and newly hatched larval fish by keeping them all inside of their mouth, which is pretty amazing to think about, especially when they're holding quite a few of those eggs at one time and quite a few of those larvae at once. This mouth brooding skill is also shared by arowana dads. Arowanas are a freshwater species that can be found in our flooded forest exhibit, as well as our ancient fishes exhibit in our temperate gallery. And then one more example that's worth mentioning are lumpfish. Now, lumpfish are a cold water marine species, and dads of this particular species have a little bit of a different approach, but still they are very involved in the child rearing process. They will pre-select a nesting area, and they will clean that nesting area, and after the moms lay the eggs and the dads fertilize the eggs, they will turn a bright orange hue. They will guard this nest of eggs, and they will even care for them by fanning water over the egg nest with their fins, which is really cool to see. When we do have those in our collection, a lot of time you can see them in our Northern Waters Gallery, particularly in our Boulder Reef exhibit. I don't believe we have any there currently, but we may certainly in the future, so keep your eye out for those species. But let's get back to seahorses here, Taylor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for highlighting some of those other aquatic dads, Nick. But let's talk about what makes seahorses unique from those other fish fathers. Now, seahorses do carry eggs, and that might be something that you are familiar with, that term. But did you know that male seahorses are the only known male animal that can get pregnant? So that is right, pregnant. What does that mean? Well, essentially, you are probably familiar with moms fertilizing eggs, but in seahorses, it's actually the dads that do the fertilizing. So mom will swim upside dad and deposit her unfertilized egg into a special pouch on his abdomen. And after those eggs are inside of the brood pouch, dad will fertilize the eggs. So essentially, he gets pregnant, which is pretty unique and special. Now, other animals in the same category as seahorses, so pipefish and sea dragons, both of which you can see here at the New England Aquarium, also care for their young, but the difference between seahorses and their relatives is that the males of those animals will actually hold fertilized eggs on a spongy patch under their tail. So essentially mom does the fertilizing and then passes those eggs off to dad instead of the males actually doing the fertilizing in those species, which I think is pretty incredible. But before we tell you more about seahorse babies, let's actually take a step back and talk about courtship, because from what I understand, Nick, seahorse courtship is also pretty unique and special.
It certainly is, Taylor. And it's very important to talk about the courtship period as well, right? So let's go into that a little bit. So seahorses are typically animals that will mate for long periods of time with the same mate. So you could refer to them as being monogamish. This was a word that Taylor created this morning in our outline, and I love it. It makes a lot of sense. You might say, like I was mentioning, you might say they're monogamish. While some species will stay with the same successful mate their whole life, others will actually readily switch mates. So it's not truly monogamy, but it's along the lines of that. Once seahorses do find a mate that they're ready to, and they are ready to breed, rather, they begin an elaborate courtship process that can last from several hours to multiple days. Courtship also involves a lot of dancing.
Dancing?
Or at least that's what it looks like to an outside observer. Turns out I apparently have something in common with seahorses. During this dance, the seahorses will change colors. They'll hold on to each other's tails. They will twirl around each other, spiraling all the way up into the water column. And scientists believe that this courtship dance actually reinforces their pair bond and allows them to practice synchronizing their movements for a successful transfer of over 1,000 eggs. So you might make the connection to human beings going on several dates to synchronize whether they actually like each other and they might be compatible.
Gotcha.
Same thing happening with seahorses. So first comes the dancing, Taylor. Then comes the egg transfer that you mentioned. And after a successful male pregnancy comes
babies! Yes, that's what comes next. So seahorse offspring can take anywhere from 10 days to 2 months to fully develop. And the duration of that can be impacted by a number of factors, including water temperature. After receiving lots of protection and important nutrients for growth and development inside of dad's brood pouch, the young are born as fully formed individuals. So they actually look like little miniature versions of their parents, which is pretty cool because a lot of larval fish actually will not look quite like mom and dad yet. So upon their release from dad's brood pouch, typically at night, they are ready to take on the ocean all on their own. That includes finding food and hiding places and navigating their habitats. Now, because seahorse babies are so small, they are highly susceptible to predation, unfortunately. So mom and dad will waste absolutely no time working on the next batch of babies. And in fact, dad will be ready to start that whole courtship process again, usually the morning after releasing his young from the brood pouch, and will be ready to accept eggs from a female as little as 24 hours after releasing his young.
Wow. That's a quick turnaround.
Pretty impressive, yeah. These seahorses aren't messing around. Well, I think at this point, now that we've kind of laid out some seahorse breeding and courtship and babies, it's probably time to take some questions from our audience. So again, if you're just joining us for the first time, this is the time when we answer your questions. So go ahead and type those into the comment section. And our lovely assistant this morning, Vanessa, will read those off to us and we'll do our best to answer them. Vanessa, do we have any questions this morning?
Refreshing. So while Vanessa is looking to check on all of your questions that hopefully you're putting in the comments section, hopefully you noticed some of the great views that she was able to get, close-ups of our seahorses. Taylor mentioned that our aquarist responsible for this exhibit, Tori, just put some small shrimp into the exhibit for the seahorses to feed on. Turns out that seahorses are excellent predators, but we're going to save that for another Facebook Live.
Yeah, we'll do a whole video all about really cool adaptations of seahorses.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So we have several people who just asked, what is the lifespan of a seahorse?
What is the lifespan of a seahorse? That is a good question.
Very good question.
So if I'm remembering correctly, it does vary based on the species. Seahorses come in lots of different shapes, well, shapes-ish, camouflage shapes and sizes. So the smallest seahorse is just millimeters long, and the largest seahorse can be up to a few inches long. And oftentimes the bigger an animal of a species is, the longer it lives, because it takes a little while to get big. So I want to say it's somewhere in the 3 to 7 year range. They're fairly short-lived animals, but we'll double check that unless Nick is pulling something out of his brain right now that I'm not.
bear with me for 1 minute.
We have an expert behind the scenes.
Tori.
Nick's gonna go consult the expert.
Tori! Oh, she ran away! I was going to go find Tori and ask her. I think that Taylor's answer was perfect. I think that makes a lot of sense. And with any type of animal, there's certainly variation between the different species. Like Taylor was mentioning, there are probably some that are more short-lived versus others that might be more hardy and longer-lived. So yeah.
Terry would like to know, do seahorses in the aquarium breed?
Do seahorses in the aquarium breed? That's a great question. Nick, did you want to take that one?
Do they ever? Yes. So the answer is yes, they do breed. And we do have a bit of a seahorse breeding program here at the aquarium. Typically, we will allow them to perform that courtship and mating on exhibit. And this is not the only place that you can find seahorses here at the aquarium. We also have an exhibit at the top of our giant ocean tank that features pygmy seahorses. And they will breed on exhibit. After their newborn offspring are released from dad's pouch, we will try to collect them immediately and move them behind the scenes to a tank where we can control conditions a little bit better, make sure they're getting the proper food, nutrients they need to be able to survive, keep an eye on them medically to make sure that everyone is growing healthy. And then eventually they may end up growing up to be adults and make it back on exhibit. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we might transfer some to other zoos and aquariums as well, Taylor. I don't know if you know more about that.
We definitely do, because just like other animals, we want to make sure the genetics of all of our seahorses are really strong and healthy. So that is something that we do keep an eye on, is kind of genetic health for our animals. So if we have too many animals here that are related to each other, we'll send them to other institutions.
Yeah, good question, Terry.
Shannon would like to know if there's any particular relationship between the seahorse and the butterfly fish in there, or do they just live in the same habitat?
Oh, very good observation and good question. The butterfly fish that Shannon was mentioning is right over here. Looks like Vanessa's going to get us a nice close-up too. Taylor, I don't know if you know anything about this, but my thought is that it's a combination of they live in similar conditions and therefore can coexist very well in the exhibit. They are not predators and prey of each other. They might eat some of the same types of food. I know that butterfly fish in the tropics exist with some species of seahorses. However, we just talked about how these are New England seahorses, and so they are not likely to normally be living with butterfly fish because butterfly fish are typically found down in the tropics.
Actually, line seahorses have a pretty extensive range,
Oh,
so there would be a
point.
part of their habitat that would absolutely overlap. We're going to let you in on a little aquarium secret about butterfly fish. Butterfly fish are really effective at eating something called aptasia. Aptasia is a little tiny sea anemone, and it's a nuisance species that comes in on the water. And so typically if we have kind of one rogue butterfly fish in an exhibit, his job is the cleanup crew and to get rid of those aptasia for us. So they can survive in the same kind of habitat climate. And as Nick mentioned, they can coexist because they aren't predator and prey or competing for the same space within the habitat. But that would be my guess for why this particular butterfly fish is in this particular exhibit. He is on aptasia duty. But we'd have to ask Toru to know for sure.
And it looks like he or she is doing a good job too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lexi would like to know what they were eating.
Oh, what were the seahorses eating? Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe Vanessa can get really nice and close because there's actually some leftovers kind of hanging out up here on the column. So basically we were feeding them little tiny shrimp. And shrimp is a popular food item for a lot of our animals, and we don't just mean the kind of shrimp that you and I would eat, but these little tiny shrimp as well. Even our jellyfish will eat little itty bitty shrimp called brine shrimp. So shrimp is a popular food item. I'm not sure particularly what kind of shrimp these ones are, but that's what they're eating. They're munching on shrimp.
I was thinking maybe mysis shrimp, Taylor, but we do offer a lot of different small kinds, right?
Yeah, they definitely do look about the size of mysis, so that would be probably a pretty accurate guess.
Yeah, good question. Any other questions, Vanessa?
We're making Vanessa move all around this morning, so we're throwing her off.
Somebody did ask, what are the variations in colors of seahorses?
What are the variations in colors? Wow, that's a great question. It's a little hard to show you in this exhibit, but line seahorses can be anywhere from like a pale yellowish color to a dark rusty brown color. So most of ours appear to be more in that rusty brown color range right now. But as Nick mentioned, seahorses will also change color during mating. So they can change the pigmentation in their skin somewhat, probably through a mechanism similar to chromatophores, which we've talked about with our octopus and our cuttlefish before. But there is a lot of color variation, and then species to species, it's pretty extreme. One of the smallest seahorses in the world actually will live among Gorgonian corals. So they are like white with all these little red bumps all over their body. They're really pretty cute. You can find pictures of them on the internet pretty easily. Those little pygmy seahorses. Upstairs are our dwarf seahorses, are bright yellow, and again will kind of range from a really pale yellow to a much darker, more mustardy yellow. So there is a lot of color variation, definitely in between species, but even within the same species as well. It's kind of like human hair color. I would kind of use that analogy, right? Blonde versus brunette.
You just couldn't resist getting one mention of hair into.
I'm sorry, Nick. No one knows what color your hair is.
Yeah.
It's a mystery.
Mackenzie would like to know, are the seahorse species thriving or endangered?
Wow. What an excellent question.
That is an excellent question. Yeah. From what I remember from our research, Taylor, I think that there are probably some species that are doing reasonably well in terms of their populations, but I think others are certainly being threatened by a lot of different things, such as overfishing and climate change and other threats that affect other ocean animals as well. So I think it depends a little bit on the type of seahorse. Do you remember any more specifics other than that? You do?
I do.
Oh, Taylor's got it. Okay, go for it.
So this actually gets a little bit to animal research and how sometimes it is difficult to determine the status of an animal due to lack of data.
Sure.
So seahorses, as you might imagine, can be somewhat challenging to find out in the ocean, and extensive research hasn't been done on most species of seahorses. So for some species, we just simply don't have enough information to be able to make a determination about their status. But the general trend that scientists are noticing for seahorse populations is that they are in a slow, steady state of decline, probably due to things like accidental bycatch, so kind of holding on to fishing gear and then getting pulled up during that fishing process. And another reason actually has to do with some of the habitat that you're seeing in this exhibit. So you probably noticed our seahorses were holding on to seagrasses primarily. Now, seagrass beds are kind of a transition habitat between kind of deeper water and more inshore habitats, and those places tend to be the same places that humans hang out and can have impact due to recreational activities, boating, and fishing. So that seagrass is pretty delicate habitat and is not really a thriving habitat right now in our oceans due to human interactions in that space. So because seahorses primarily hang out in those spaces, it's a tough life for seahorses in the seagrass beds right now. But the good news is there's lots of things that we can do in order to protect those seagrass beds, because there are a number of animals that rely on it.
Smart cookie over here.
Shared brain. It really works in our favor. Are there any
does.
other questions this morning?
Last question. Are there any seahorses in there that are ready to give birth?
Ooh, good question. Are there any seahorses in there ready to give birth? Okay, now we're going to get low and look at the seahorses.
Huh, interesting.
You know, I do see a couple big bellies over here, but I am really bad at identifying male versus female seahorses.
Yeah, I am as well, Taylor.
This guy right here in particular is looking pretty poofy in the belly region.
Good question. Something fun to look at, for sure, when you do get a chance to visit the aquarium.
Yeah, similar to like a pregnant belly, seahorse dad's pouches will stretch as the eggs grow and develop and the young grow and develop inside of that brood pouch. So typically when they're ready to give birth, it's pretty obvious. They got a big old belly on them, but kind of that in-between part, it can be really tricky to tell. And I'm not seeing anyone in here right now that is super obvious. So probably nobody ready to give birth right now, if I had to guess.
Stay tuned for more on that. Okay, well, thank you guys for the great questions. As we always mention, no need to stop putting those questions in the comment section. We're just going to kind of wrap things up right now. We'll get back to your questions if we can, so go ahead and post them in the comment section on our Facebook page. Thank you guys for tuning in. To kind of bring everything together here, we just want to mention that there are a lot of great resources out there to learn a little bit more about seahorses. In our research, there was one that we came across in particular that we thought was really worth mentioning, and that is an organization that's called iSeahorse, and their website is iSeahorse.org, the letter I, seahorse.org. And this organization is great because they harness citizen scientists in helping to learn and gain a better understanding of seahorses and the protections that they need, and their preferred habitat, and their behaviors, and all the things that we can learn about seahorses. And we love promoting organizations that also encourage active citizens and ocean stewards. So definitely check out iSeahorse.org to learn a little bit more about this type of ocean animal, about their reproductive behaviors like we've been talking about, but most importantly about ways that you guys can get involved and take action and help protect them as well. We would be remiss, Taylor, if we didn't also mention that something significant has happened this week to the aquarium. On Monday, the city of Boston announced an order that required us to close our doors to the public again, unfortunately, starting from this past Wednesday. We're going to remain closed for the next 3 weeks, at which point health and safety metrics will be reevaluated again, and we'll find out more about whether we can reopen or whether we have to stay closed for a little bit longer. We hope that you guys will continue to stay engaged with us virtually. We've got a great library of past videos, including a great series that's happening and ongoing right now. That's our Blue Planet Science series. And this month, Taylor, we are featuring videos all about our turtle rescue and rehabilitation program. Hey, Taylor.
Hey, Nick.
I heard that this season has been our second busiest season on record.
and is actually on track to surpass our busiest season on record.
Which we thought would never be done, right?
Yeah, we certainly didn't.
Yeah.
And by that we mean over 700 sea turtles through our door in one season.
Yeah.
And it's just December now, so there could still be some more sea turtles coming through in the coming weeks. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about our Sea Turtle Rehab and Rescue Program, definitely check out the Blue Planet Science series and our other videos about that particular program.
In our website, in our blogs too, right, for updates on what's happening.
So much information out
So
there.
much out there. So until we see you guys next, and we're going to do our best to continue offering virtual programming as well, but until we see you next, maybe on a Facebook Live, hope that you guys stay healthy and safe out there and have a great holiday season. Take care.
Bye, friends.